to Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all of our 7th graders out there, though any student is welcome to join in. This lesson is the 5th in our series. My name is Mrs. Alley, and I'm a 7th grade teacher in Tennessee schools. I'm so excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. Today, we will be learning about the Mayan civilization. Before we get started, to participate fully in the lesson, you will need a few things. You will need something to write with and a surface to write on, paper, and the 3-column chart we've been using through our previous lessons. If you didn't see our previous lessons, you can find them on the Tennessee Department of Education website, www.tn.gov/education. You can still tune into today's lesson if you haven't seen any of our others, but it may be more fun if you first go back and watch our other lessons, since we'll be talking about the things we've learned as we go on. Let's begin. Today, we will be continuing to learn about the important developments of the Maya civilization. Our objective is to compose a short story from a perspective of an archaeological team member that discovered King Pakal's tomb. So as we go through today's lesson, let's keep that in mind. Your result at the end of today's lesson is going to be to write a story from the perspective of an archaeologist. So try to think about what kind of adventures archaeologists have. What sorts of problems may they run into? How do they solve those problems? How could you make your story exciting and interesting for your reader? You can gain all of this information from today's lesson to create a really great story in the end. In today's lesson, we will learn about the important developments of one of the early American civilizations we've been learning about, the Maya civilization. Have you ever heard someone speak in a different language and you had no idea what they were saying? It's so interesting to think that people all over the world have ways of communicating with one another, both orally and in writing. Speaking of writing, have you ever tried to read something written in a different language? Especially something that isn't written using the alphabet you're used to? This is something I'd like for you to keep in mind during our lesson today. I'm going to begin reading a section called Hidden Secrets of the Rainforest. That title should make you curious. Here's the first section of today's reading. Do you like to solve puzzles and break codes? A boy named David Stewart did. The son of archaeologists, David often accompanied his parents to the ancient Maya ruins where they worked. There, he saw sights that he had never seen before. He was particularly fascinated by the sculpted stone monuments called stelae. Often located in the central plazas of Maya cities, these giant pillars featured carvings of images and symbols. David began sketching the carvings when he was only 8 years old. One symbol looked like the head of a jaguar. Another resembled an open book. What did these glyphs or combinations of symbols mean? Let's use evidence from the text to answer these questions. What about David Stewart's childhood do you think impacted his fascination with the ancient Maya ruins? What word does the author use for the images he sees? Why do you think these glyphs were such a mystery? Let's check our answers. What about about David Stewart's childhood do you think impacted his fascination with ancient Maya ruins? He was the son of archaeologists and was surrounded by the ruins. Isn't it interesting that he began sketching the carvings when he was only 8 years old? Pull out a piece of paper and see if you can sketch one. I'll try to. You can see some examples on the screen. Are you finished? That was a lot of fun. Here's mine. I'm sure yours are fantastic. What word does the author use for the images he sees? Glyphs. These glyphs, or carved symbols, have survived thousands of years of erosion by humidity, heat, and tropical storms, and they greatly puzzled archaeologists. Why do you think these glyphs were such a mystery? No one from the ancient tribes of the Maya civilization was left to explain what they were. Let's keep reading. Decoding an ancient language. David soon learned that archaeologists were often puzzled by these carved symbols. Many of the carvings had survived despite thousands of years of erosion and humidity, heat, and tropical storms. Still, nobody knew what these sequences of symbols meant. Some scholars suspected that the symbols were largely decorative. Others were convinced that the symbols were a form of writing. Among these scholars was a young Russian named Yuri Norisov, who began to decode or translate the hieroglyphics. His translations uncovered the true nature of the Mayan writing system. Some glyphs were syllables or parts of words, while others represented whole words. They were far from being just pretty pictures. Let's use evidence from the text to answer these questions. What do some of the other scholars, like Yuri Norisov, believe these glyphs might be? If you had discovered Maya glyphs, would you believe they are decoration or writing? Explain your answer. Why do you think the scholars were so anxious to learn what these glyphs meant? Pay attention to the word decode as we read the text again. What do you think this word means? David soon learned that archaeologists were often puzzled by these carved symbols. Many of the carvings had survived despite thousands of years of erosion by humidity, heat, and tropical storms. Still, nobody knew what these sequences of symbols meant. Some scholars suspected that the symbols were largely decorative. Others were convinced that the symbols were a form of writing. Among these scholars was a young Russian named Yuri Norisov, who began to decode or translate the hieroglyphics. His translations uncovered the true nature of the Maya writing system. Some glyphs were syllables or parts of words, while others represented whole words. They were far from being just pretty pictures. Did you catch the meaning for the word decode? What was it that Urey discovered about the glyphs? Let's check our answers. What did some of the other scholars, like Yuri Norisov, believe these glyphs might be? Some thought they were just decorative, and some thought they were a form of writing. How interesting. If you had discovered the Maya glyphs, would you believe they are decoration or writing? I said that I'd probably fall on the side of decoration because the ancient ruins I've seen pictures of are full of carvings. I'm not so sure that I would have taken the time to study the carvings and see how similar they were to one another and likely meant something. I would have needed David and Urey to convince me for sure. Why do you think the scholars were so anxious to learn what these glyphs meant? I'm thinking that the scholars thought the glyphs might reveal important information about the ancient people that created them. And just maybe, some might have thought that the glyphs held secrets to treasure maybe. Pay attention to the word decode as we read the text again, which we did. What do you think this word means? When we read the text again, you should have been able to determine that the word decode means to interpret or read. They wanted to read them. I wonder how one reads carved images. What was it that Urey discovered about the glyphs? Well, according to the text, Urey worked hard to uncover the mystery of the Maya glyphs. He discovered they represented the Maya writing system. Some glyphs were syllables, some were just parts of words, and others were whole words. Let's pull out our 3-column chart from our previous lessons. We're going to add some more information under the column for Maya. The first thing we're going to add is Maya writing system. Next, we will add glyphs. That was the Maya's writing system. Then we will add carved symbols for writing. That's what glyphs are. Now let's add first decoded by Yuri Norisov. It's important that we remember this archaeologist's name, as he was the very first to decode that the glyphs they were looking at were actual words and writing, not just pretty pictures. Great job. Let's dig back in. Yuri Norisov published the results of his research in 1952. Some epigraphers, people who decode and interpret ancient writing systems, were doubtful of his work. Others, including David Stewart, were eager to decode more. Today, approximately 85% of the Maya glyphs have been decoded. These glyphs help bring the ancient Maya world to life. They provide records of important dates and events, including the reigns of kings and the movement of the stars. The Maya developed a system of writing that used around 800 distinct glyphs. Scribes patiently painted symbols onto the folded bark paper of a codex. They created many of these ancient books, or codices. Many codices were destroyed or have disappeared. Hieroglyphics carved in stone, however, continue to tell stories from ancient Maya city-states, even today. Let's continue to use evidence from the text to answer the following questions. Urey published the results of his research on the Maya glyphs in 1952, just under 70 years ago. Why do you think it took so long for scholars to decode the glyphs? How many distinct glyphs did the text say were in the Maya writing system? Let's check our answers. Urey published the results of his research on the Maya glyphs in 1952, just under 70 years ago. Why do you think it took so long for scholars to decode the glyphs? I'm guessing it's very hard work, but knowing that this wasn't that long ago, it makes sense to think that no one had been able to decode them until then. How many distinct glyphs did the text say were in the Maya writing system? Around 800. That's unbelievable. Now I'd like for you to look closely at the image of this Maya scribe, which is another word for a person who writes. What does it look like he's doing? He's working on painting the glyphs on folded bark paper called codex. It's like an ancient book. Can you imagine how much you'd have to remember and how long it would take to do this work? Let's go back to our 3-column chart and add some more information under the column for Maya. First, let's add that there were 800 distinct glyphs. Now let's add that we only know about 85% of the glyphs. Let's add the word scribes. Scribes were the Mayans who recorded the glyphs in their ancient books. Remember the picture we just looked at? We have learned some very important information about the ancient Maya civilization through decoding the glyphs, including the reigns of kings, the movement of stars, and stories about the Maya people. That is so cool. Now that I have you hooked, let's keep going. Buried treasure in the Temple of Inscriptions, Palenque, in present-day Mexico, contains one of the longest carved hieroglyphic texts yet found. Elements of Palenque's history are carved on panels that form the walls of its temples of inscriptions. This temple was built to honor one of Palenque's kings, King Pakal. Kinich Janab Pakal rose to power when he was only 12 years old. He ruled Palenque for nearly 70 years. Pakal, like other Mayan rulers, spent many years planning his own burial tomb. The tomb inside Palenque's famous Temple of Inscriptions lay hidden for many years. In 1948, a Mexican archaeologist named Alberto Ruiz Lullier discovered a trap door that led to the tomb. It took 4 years for Alberto Ruiz Lullier and his team to carefully clear rubble from the opening beneath the trap door. There, they discovered a stairway leading down to the king's sarcophagus or coffin. When archaeologists opened the coffin's ornate lid, they found what is presumed to be Pakal's skeletal remains. He was buried with an abundance of jade, the Maya's most precious stone. Jade necklaces, earrings, rings, and bracelets filled the coffin. The most magnificent of all the pieces was the mosaic death mask. It was common practice in Maya culture to place masks over rulers' faces to protect them in the afterlife. Pakal's mask is spectacular, made from hundreds of pieces of green jade. The mask features decorative pieces of shell and dark obsidian. Let's answer some questions. So we learned that the Temple of the Inscriptions was built to honor a king named Pakal. How old was he when he came to rule? Use the following portion of the text below to find your answer. Janab Pakal rose to power when he was only 12 years old. He ruled Palenque for nearly 70 years. Pakal, like other Maya rulers, spent many years planning his own burial tomb. Wow, he was just 12 years old. King Pakal came to power when he was only 12 and ruled for nearly 70 years. That's a long time. He spent years planning his burial tomb, which included hieroglyphics on the walls. Take a moment to jot down what you believe was so fascinating about the hieroglyphics found on the walls of the Temple of Inscription. I'm thinking they are probably a beautiful sight. Plus, they are one of the longest carved hieroglyphic texts ever found to date. They weren't even discovered until 1948, not that long ago. We also read that archaeologists discovered a trapdoor that led to the tomb of King Pakal. What did they discover behind the hidden trapdoor? Use the following portion of the text to find the answer. In 1948, a Mexican archaeologist named Alberto Ruz Lulier discovered a trapdoor that led to the tomb. It took 4 years for Alberto Ruz Lulier and his team to carefully clear rubble from the opening beneath the trapdoor. There, they discovered a stairway leading down to the king's sarcophagus, or coffin. They found the king's sarcophagus, or coffin. What was so special about the items in the king's sarcophagus? Use this portion of the text to find your answer. When archaeologists opened the coffin's ornate lid, they found what is presumed to be Pakal's skeletal remains. He was buried in an abundance of jade, the Maya's most precious stone. Jade necklaces, earrings, rings, and bracelets filled the coffin. The most magnificent of all the pieces was the mosaic death mask. He was found with lots of precious stones made into jewelry and embedded into his death mask. Let's look at a picture of the king's real death mask. Wow, that's quite a mask. Take a moment to jot down what you remember about why ancient Mayas would place a death mask over a ruler's face. Remember, they believed it would protect them in the afterlife. I wonder if the Maya glyphs tell us what they believe one might encounter in the afterlife and how a death mask would be protection. Let's grab our 3-column chart. We have some information to add under the column for Maya. First, let's add Temple of Inscriptions for King Pakal. Next, let's add ruler at 12 years old. Now we're going to add trapdoor to secret tomb found in 1948. And finally, death mask made with precious jade. Great job on your chart today. We've learned so much new information about the Maya today. This will help you finish up today's lesson. I'd like for you to answer some questions that will get you thinking and prepare you for today's independent practice. What role have archaeologists played in discovering what we know about the ancient Maya civilization? Yes, because of archaeologists, we have a pretty good idea about how the Maya lived, what they grew, who ruled, and what and when, and much more. Make sure you have your 3-column chart, several pieces of blank paper, and a pencil ready. You are going to be writing a narrative for your independent practice today. Before we go over the prompt, let's review what elements should be included in narrative writing. Remember, a narrative is a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. Include a setting, characters, conflict, rising action, climax, falling action, and a resolution. Most of all, be creative. Here's your prompt. I want you to imagine that you are one of the archaeologists that discovered King Pakal's tomb. Write a narrative story describing your experience from the time that your team walked into the Temple of Inscriptions, your amazement when you see the wall of hieroglyphics, and then finally your team's discovery of King Pakal's tomb behind the trap door. Use the new information on your chart to provide good descriptions and details. Your chart should also help you stay close to some real facts even though you are making your story up. That's called historical fiction. I'm so excited for you to write this story. Make it a bit mysterious and really fun for your family and friends to read when you are done. I enjoyed learning about the ancient Mayan civilization with you today. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you next time for our lessons on Tennessee's At Home Learning Series. Bye.